Hello, I'm Josh Hallam, and welcome back to another Just Films and That new release special. Hope you're all well. Apologies in advance if my voice is a little bit croaky. I have just had a cold. Don't worry, I'll soldier on to give you the film-related content that lots of other people doing, but for some reason you picked us, and we're very, very grateful for that. Anyway, this time around, I'm going to be talking you through my thoughts on Martin Scorsese's latest film, Killers of the Flower Moon. As with all the others, I will try and keep this as spoiler-free as possible, but if you don't want to know anything at all, make sure you listen to this after you've seen it, although I will say the film is based on real events. Whilst I've got you, if you could head over to the app that you're listening to this on and give us a little rating and review, it would be massively appreciated. But listen, thanks for listening. We love you all. You're all absolutely fantastic. Okay, let's get stuck in then. So, if you don't know, the film is an adaptation of the book of the same name by David Gann, and it takes a look at the real events that occurred in Oklahoma in the 20s, post-World War I, in which the Osage tribe of Native Americans were basically targeted and exploited due to the fact that they had incidentally happened to inherit loads of wealth from the oil that came from the land that they were actually displaced to. Before I go into my thoughts, I will just say that I know pretty much nothing about the subject matter and wider sort of historical context. So I suppose, that in itself highlights the injustice of the events, but the point I'm making is that I'll do my best to use the correct terminology. If I get anything wrong, apologies in advance. Do feel free to email me, and I'll put corrections out on the social media if I've got anything wrong. As ever, this will be in the general structure of one of our episodes, starting with what I liked, moving on to the opposite of that, I suppose. Okay, so, overall, I thought it was good. As ever with the Scorsese film, it is incredibly well crafted with beautiful cinematography and just generally excellent, mise en scène and visually and all that sort of stuff. Of all the Scorsese films that I can think of, this one comes closest in my mind to Gangs of New York, which is actually one of my favourites of his, and I think is underrated. It's actually on a long list of films for the podcast. I haven't got around to picking it yet. The film is set over a number of years, so what you do is you get to see the setting and the characters and the town slowly build up over that time, and you won't necessarily notice it unless you look, because the film is quite long, which I'll come on to later. You do get that real subtle change in costume and other stylistic things, like slight tweaks in hair, slight tweaks in costume, and you also get to see things like the building grow and the town grow and stuff like that. And what it does is draws you into the world of the film and keeps you visually engaged. And another thing I think Scorsese does really well in both this and other films he's done, which are sort of on a bigger scale, is use supporting characters to enrich the world of the film as well. So obviously I know that is that's down to the writing as well, but in terms of the whole team, the whole production team, I think what it does is it gives, by giving those supporting characters little bits to do, you feel like you're in a real world that existed before you watched it and will exist after you watched it. We've touched on it in the podcast before. These little bits of character development make it feel like you're looking at that richer palette, rather than a world that was, built for 4 or 5 actors to shine, whilst all the other people seem like robots or empty vessels and stuff like that. Whilst we're on the more micro elements of the film, the real standout element for me in that sense was the music, more specifically the score. So it was actually, if you don't know, it's the last film of Robbie Robertson, who sadly passed away, I think this year or possibly last year. He's a bit of an unsung hero in terms of film score, so he's not as well known as a Hans Zimmer, a John Williams, or a Danny Elfman, but he has worked with Scorsese for many, many years, and he's been a big part in helping him create so many brilliant different worlds. The music in this is no different. It's really soulful, it's really bluesy. It sort of feels a little bit like it's appropriate to the setting, but with a bit of a modern twist. There's a touch of the I suppose there's a touch of the early Peaky Blinders about, and what I mean by that is before Peaky Blinders became a little bit of a parody of itself, and it used a lot of more recent, more modern, more music to make it feel like more modern. Anyway, so that was a very good way of putting it, wasn't it? All the way through, there's this constant heartbeat-like bass line that really creates this constant sense of unease and really underlines the knavish, I suppose, deeds of the main characters as they're trying to exploit the Osage people. All of these elements work together really well to create a piece that I think does a pretty good job of exploring that idea of the lengths people will go to service themselves and gain things, and the idea of, the power of money to corrupt. One of the ways I think they execute that really well in this is the shocking way in which the Osage people are discussed as if they're property or animals or science experiments or something like that. It's really, really dehumanizing for them. But the characters talk about it with such nonchalance that it dawns on you towards the end that it's just the absolutely atrocious things that they did to them that were going on. In terms of performances, there's some great performances in this. Leonardo DiCaprio is obviously the star. He's excellent in this, as he usually is. I've seen people saying he's a little bit cartoonish or over the top. Listen, I disagree with that. I think he does a good job of keeping it quite subtle, and rather than doing his big sort of Al Pacino-like bursts, which I think he does maybe once in this, maybe twice, he does a lot more in this with his posture and his face and stuff like that. It's quite an unvain performance from him, that sort of thing. So there's some great performing turns in it. Sorry, the great supporting turns in it as well, from the likes of John Lithgow's in this. Brendan Fraser's in it for a little bit as well. The real standout in terms of performances for me, despite what I've said, is Lily Gladstone, who plays Molly. Now, I haven't seen her in anything before. I know she's done a bit of TV stuff, but I've not seen her do anything before. I thought she was pretty spellbinding in this. She has a lot of emotionally sort of a lot of things happen to her. They really put her character through the ringer, and I think she nails it in every scene she's in, whether she's big or small, or even there are scenes where she's not doing anything, and there's a touch of the what's going on behind those eyes type performance. It really gripped me and engaged me. In fact, I think that the times I was most invested in this film were when she was on screen. She's the real emotional heart of the film, and I'm really looking forward to what she does next. Okay, in terms of what I didn't like then, listen, I'm not going to go into it too much because we're not really about that on this podcast. We like to be optimistic. Having said that, we also like to be balanced. So I'll start with the main issue I have, which I will not be the first to comment on. Might sound a little bit basic, but I will go into why I think that is, because it's a wider issue that's got sort of two issues under it. It's long. My God, this film is long. It's a real bum number. Now, I've had stick before for moan about long films, and for me, I don't mind how long a film is if you don't notice the running time. But I did with this, and part of me wonders if actually this might have started life as a sort of TV adaptation and changed along the way when certain people became attached. It is an Apple TV thing, so maybe that's also some indication. But they have done films as well. I don't want to be as basic as saying, "Oh, it's too long," because that's not really any sort of criticism or any sort of feedback. That just sounds like I can't be asked to think of something to say. But I think more specifically, the issues are around the pacing and some issues with perspective, which I'll come on to, which I think come from the adaptation process. So the real issue around the film, so it's perspective. I think there's some issues with perspective for me. So I've read around the film that I believe it started from the perspective of Jesse Plemons' character, who I believe is called Tom White, who is a agent from the newly formed FBI who's investigating the case of all the murdered people from the Osage tribe. And then I believe this was changed, and Leonardo DiCaprio possibly lobbied for it to be changed and then wanted to play the role of Ernest, which he eventually did. So I think what happens is you have a lot of stuff in the first half of the film which is unnecessary because it's sort of building him up, or it's showing him and what he's about and stuff like that, which I think you could definitely lost some of that. For me, I think I would have liked more around the investigation and the conviction side of it, which happens towards the end. And when it does happen, for me, it felt a little bit tacked on and a little bit, a little bit inconsequential almost. Not the actual crimes, but it's sort of like, and then this happened in the end. Although there is a really good device towards the end, which if you've seen it, you'll know what I mean. But I really like the use of that. So then that other issue with perspective, it's told from the perspective of Leonardo DiCaprio character Ernest. And it sort of seems to suggest that he didn't really know what he was doing, that he was wrapped up in the whole thing by his Machiavellian uncle, played by Robert De Niro. And that leads to a lot of unanswered questions around his intentions, his motivations, his actual feelings towards Molly, his wife, what's going on with her. the things he does to sort of the people from the Osage tribe, her mysterious illness. It's not clear if he knew, and I think if you read around it, I think he definitely did know. But I'm not expert as I say in the context. But I think for me, it's a little unclear. So that aspect is a little bit. You don't know. Are you siding with DiCaprio? Is he an unreliable narrator? It's not quite sure. And I think they needed to nail their colours to the mast. If it was me, I would prefer to have seen it told from the point of view of Molly, his wife, played by Lily Gladstone, as I've already said, or someone else from the Osage people. But listen, overall, the film is exceptionally well made. It's visually interesting. It's orally stunning. Love the score. I don't think for me it'll go down as one of Martin Scorsese's best films, but that's not it's still a very, very well made film. That's no insult. To say it's not one of Martin Scorsese's best films is to say that's no insult. That's like saying it's not my favorite flavor of ice cream in the ice cream shop. Do you know what I mean? It's all sweet. It's all nice sort of thing. So it's not one of my favorites. It's still a very, very well made film. I wouldn't be surprised if this got nominated for all sorts of awards, but we'll see. As ever, get out there, give it a watch, make up your mind, let us know your thoughts on social media or email in, and I'll see you next time. Cheerio!